For 3 winters, the old couple believed the abandoned Wyoming ranch would never have an owner again. So they repaired the broken fences, kept the fire burning, and survived the cold one storm at a time. Quiet, lonely, almost forgotten. Then one snowy morning, a truck appeared at the end of the road. At first, they thought Blackstone Energy had come back to force them out again, but this time, it wasn't. The man stepping out of the truck wasn't a stranger to the ranch. He was the man who truly owned it, a Marine. Beside him stood a massive German Shepherd K9, and when he looked at the smoke rising from his family's chimney and asked, "Who's living in my home?" everything changed. If this story stays with you, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and watch until the very end. Early winter swept across the Wyoming mountains with bitter wind, heavy snow, and a silence that made the empty roads feel endless. Gunnery Sergeant Logan Hayes drove slowly through the storm in an old dark green Ford pickup that rattled every time the wind slammed against it. Logan was 38 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a solid frame of a man who had spent most of his life carrying weight heavier than himself. His dark brown hair was cut short in military fashion, though several uneven streaks near his temples hinted at stress more than age. A rough beard covered his sharp jawline, and an old scar near his chin disappeared beneath the shadow of it. But the thing people noticed most about Logan Hayes was always his eyes. Cold gray, restless. The eyes of someone who never truly stopped scanning rooms, roads, exits, or people. Years of Marine service had trained him to stay calm under pressure, but years of disaster relief deployments after hurricanes, floods, and wildfires had done something else entirely. Those missions changed the way he looked at loss. He had watched too many people stand in front of ruined homes holding pieces of lives they could not rebuild. Somewhere along the way, Logan stopped letting himself get attached to places. Places disappeared too easily. Beside him sat Rex, a 6-year-old German Shepherd canine with rich amber and black fur thick enough for the Wyoming cold. Rex was massive, nearly filling the passenger seat, but every movement the dog made carried discipline and control. His pointed ears twitched constantly at outside sounds, while his golden brown eyes followed the road ahead through the snow. Rex rarely barked without reason. Logan trusted that more than words. The folded county notice inside Logan's jacket pocket felt heavier than the pistol he used to carry overseas. 45 days, that was all the time left before Iron Creek Ranch would be seized for unpaid taxes and handed over to Blackstone Energy's pipeline expansion project. 7 years ago, after his parents died during a flash flood near the Northern River crossing, Logan left Wyoming and never truly came back. At first, he told himself the Marine Corps needed him elsewhere. Then came rescue contracts, emergency deployments, training operations. Eventually, leaving simply became easier than returning to a ranch filled with ghosts. But ignoring grief had a cost. Now the debt waiting at Iron Creek Ranch had finally caught up with him. The truck turned onto the old dirt road leading toward Gray Hollow. Logan's jaw tightened instinctively. He knew every curve of this road, even after 7 years away. His father used to drive him down this exact path during winter storms while teaching him how to handle ice beneath truck tires. Logan remembered laughing back then. That memory felt strange now, almost borrowed from somebody else's life. Rex suddenly lifted his head higher. Logan noticed immediately. "What is it?" The dog stared ahead through the windshield. Then Logan saw it too, smoke, thin gray smoke rising through the snow near the ranch house chimney. His grip tightened around the steering wheel. That was impossible. Iron Creek Ranch should have been abandoned for years. As the truck rolled into the yard, Logan's heartbeat slowed into something colder and sharper. The front fence had been repaired recently with fresh timber. One side of the horse barn carried new support beams. Firewood sat stacked neatly beneath a tarp near the porch. Somebody was living here. Logan stepped out carefully, boots sinking into deep snow while the freezing wind hit his face. Rex climbed out beside him immediately, body tense but controlled. The canine's posture told Logan everything he needed to know. Alert, watchful, but not threatened yet. The ranch looked alive. That unsettled him more than finding it destroyed would have. Logan moved toward the porch slowly. Every instinct from years in dangerous environments sharpened automatically. His eyes scanned windows, rooflines, tracks in the snow. He hated that his own home still made him move like a stranger entering hostile ground. Before he could knock, the front door opened. An elderly man stood there holding an oil lantern. Walter Bennett looked like somebody the Wyoming winters had tried to break for decades without fully succeeding. 72 years old, tall but painfully thin, with deeply weathered skin and rough hands scarred from years of carpentry work. Thick white hair curled beneath a faded wool cap while gray stubble covered his narrow jaw. Despite his age, Walter still carried himself protectively the second he saw Logan. Behind him stood Margaret Bennett. Margaret looked fragile enough that a strong wind might knock her over. She was 69 years old, short and slender with pale skin and silver hair braided loosely behind her head. Deep exhaustion rested beneath her soft blue eyes, and one trembling hand stayed pressed lightly against her chest as though breathing itself required effort. Yet even standing frightened in the doorway, there was kindness in her face. Walter's expression hardened immediately. "We already told Blackstone we need more time." Logan frowned. "What?" Walter glanced nervously toward Rex. "You people really bring dogs now?" Rex stood silently beside Logan without growling. The Marine slowly reached into his jacket. Walter instantly shifted half a step in front of Margaret despite clearly being no threat to anyone physically anymore. Logan pulled out folded documents. "This ranch belongs to me," he said calmly. "Logan Hayes." Silence settled over the porch. Margaret looked down at the paperwork, then back at Logan with visible confusion. Walter's grip tightened around the lantern handle before his shoulders slowly dropped. "We thought nobody was coming back," he admitted quietly. Logan looked past them into the house. Warm firelight flickered across repaired floorboards and freshly rebuilt shelves. A wood stove burned steadily near the kitchen while blankets hung drying beside it. Nothing looked stolen or careless. It looked cared for. Margaret swallowed nervously. "We didn't damage anything." Walter nodded quickly. "The roof was collapsing when we found the place. Pipes frozen, barn half gone." Logan remained silent. Walter lowered his eyes. "My wife got sick 3 years ago, heart condition." His voice roughened slightly. "Medical bills took our home." Margaret looked embarrassed hearing it spoken aloud. "We only stayed because winter was coming," she added softly. Then another winter came after that. For some reason, Logan could not find anger anywhere inside himself. He expected resentment. Instead, he saw two exhausted old people trying to survive inside a place he himself abandoned years earlier. Rex moved first. The German Shepherd calmly walked past Walter into the house, sniffed near the fireplace, then quietly settled beside Margaret's chair. She looked startled when the huge dog rested against her leg without fear. Logan watched closely. Rex trusted people rarely. Slowly, Logan stepped inside the ranch house. The warmth hit him immediately, followed by memories he spent 7 years trying to outrun. His mother humming near the stove, his father cleaning tools after snowstorms, the smell of coffee before sunrise. Then Logan noticed the framed photograph above the fireplace. His parents, cleaned carefully, protected from dust. Somebody had taken care of them after he failed to. The pressure in his chest tightened unexpectedly. Walter noticed where Logan was looking. "Your mother had a beautiful smile," the old man said quietly. Logan said nothing. Outside, snow continued falling over Iron Creek Ranch. Inside the old farmhouse, the silence between strangers slowly began turning into something else. Then Walter spoke again, his voice lower this time. "There's something you should know about Blackstone Energy." And the Logan turned toward him. He realized coming home had been a far bigger mistake than he first believed. The Wyoming morning arrived gray and bitterly cold, with snow drifting across the ranch fence beneath a sky that looked heavy enough to collapse. Logan Hayes woke before sunrise on the old couch near the fireplace, his body snapping awake at the faint creak of wood outside. For a brief second, his hand moved toward the flashlight beside him before he realized where he was. Iron Creek Ranch, the place he had spent 7 years avoiding. He sat there quietly, elbows on his knees, staring at the weak orange glow inside the stove while Rex lifted his head from the floor nearby. The German Shepherd's thick amber-black fur reflected the firelight as the dog watched Logan with calm alertness. Rex rarely barked without reason, but he noticed everything. That was what made Logan trust him more than most people. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Walter Bennett stood near the counter wearing a faded denim jacket over an old flannel shirt, his thin frame bent slightly from years of physical labor. In daylight, Logan could see the deep cracks in the old man's hands, the permanent marks left by decades of carpentry work in Wyoming winters. Walter moved slowly but with purpose, like someone who had spent his whole life fixing things because nobody else would. "You always wake up this early?" Walter asked quietly. Logan shrugged once. "Habit." Walter gave a faint nod like he understood more than he said. Men like him usually did. Margaret Bennett sat at the small kitchen table wrapped in a thick knitted sweater several sizes too large for her narrow shoulders. Her silver hair was tied loosely behind her head, and the pale color of her skin made the dark circles beneath her eyes stand out more clearly this morning. Despite her weak condition, there was something gentle and calming about her presence. She smiled softly when Rex walked over and rested his large head against her knee. "He likes you," Logan said. Margaret stroked Rex's fur slowly. "No," she replied quietly. "I think he worries." That answer stayed in Logan's head longer than he expected. Later that morning, Walter showed Logan the repairs around the ranch. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they crossed the frozen yard toward the barn. Logan noticed patched fences, reinforced roof beams, and fresh boards nailed across sections of the stable wall. None of it looked professional, but all of it looked determined. Somebody had fought hard to keep this place standing. "Most of the roof was gone when we found it," Walter explained. "First winter nearly killed us." Logan ran his hand along one of the support beams. "You rebuilt this yourself?" Walter nodded. "Took months." The Marine looked around the barn silently. His father's old tools still hung near the workbench exactly where they used to. That hit him harder than he expected. 7 years had passed, but walking through the ranch still felt like stepping inside unfinished grief. Every corner carried memories he never dealt with properly. His father laughing beside the horses, his mother yelling from the porch for dinner, snowstorms shaking the windows at night while the house stayed warm. Logan suddenly looked away. Walter noticed. "Your father helped people around here," the old man said quietly. "A lot more than folks knew." Logan stayed silent. "He helped me once too," Walter continued. "Truck slid into a ditch during a blizzard 15 years ago. Your father pulled me out himself." For some reason, that made Logan's chest tighten more than hearing about his father's death ever did. Back near the house, Margaret suddenly grabbed the porch railing beside her. Her breathing shortened sharply. Logan moved immediately while Rex reached her first, pressing tightly against her legs. "Margaret," Walter hurried toward her. "I'm all right," she whispered, though her trembling hand said otherwise. Logan watched the scene with growing unease. Combat never bothered him like this. Watching somebody quietly lose strength over time felt worse somehow. Rex remained beside Margaret until her breathing finally steadied again. Walter lowered his eyes. "Heart condition," he admitted softly. "Treatment took everything we had." That explained why they stayed. That explained why 2 elderly people chose to survive inside a dying ranch through Wyoming winters instead of asking anyone for help. By late afternoon, the sound of tires crunching over gravel broke the silence outside. Walter's face changed instantly. Logan noticed it immediately. A black SUV rolled slowly into the yard before stopping near the porch. The man stepping out carried himself with the confidence of somebody used to controlling conversations before they even started. Curtis Shaw was around 45, tall and broad with dark slick-back hair touched by gray near the sides. His expensive black coat looked completely out of place against the muddy snow of Gray Hollow. Clean boots, trimmed beard, smooth smile. Logan disliked him immediately. Curtis glanced toward Walter and Margaret first. "Still here, huh?" Margaret lowered her eyes. Walter's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" Curtis ignored the question when he noticed Logan standing beside the barn. "Well," he said slowly, "guess the rumors were true." Logan crossed his arms. "You know who I am. Everybody around Gray Hollow knows the Hayes family." Curtis smiled slightly. "Didn't think one of you would finally come back." There was something fake about the man's politeness. Logan had dealt with people like him before during disaster contracts and military rebuilding projects. Men who smiled while stripping desperate people apart piece by piece. Curtis looked toward the ranch. "Blackstone Energy's offering generous deals around here. This property's going to disappear eventually anyway." "It's not for sale," Logan answered. Curtis chuckled softly. "You sure about that? County takes it in 45 days. Walter stepped closer. "You've been threatening folks around this town for years." Curtis finally looked irritated. I'm trying to help people before the government takes everything. No, Walter snapped, you're helping yourself. The temperature in the yard seemed to drop. Curtis suddenly moved toward Margaret. You really think hiding here changes anything? Before Logan could react, Rex stepped directly between them with a low growl vibrating deep in his chest. The German shepherd stood rigid and unmoving, amber eyes locked on Curtis without blinking. Curtis froze immediately. Rex did not bark, somehow that made it worse. Logan took one calm step forward. You should leave. For the first time since arriving, Curtis lost his confident smile. His eyes moved between Logan and the canine before he slowly backed away. This place won't survive winter, he muttered. Logan's expression never changed. Then I guess we'll find out. Curtis stared at him another second before turning back toward the SUV. Snow blew across the yard as the vehicle disappeared down the road. Silence settled over the ranch again. Walter exhaled heavily and sat down on the porch steps while Margaret rested one shaking hand against Rex's neck. The dog stayed close beside her without moving. Logan looked across the frozen property one more time. Yesterday this ranch felt like a burden he planned to sell. Now, for reasons he still didn't fully understand, it felt like something worth protecting. Then he noticed fresh tire tracks near the eastern fence line, tracks that definitely were not there this morning. Heavy clouds swallowed the Wyoming sky as another storm rolled toward Gray Hollow, covering Iron Creek Ranch in bitter wind and blowing snow. The fresh tire tracks near the eastern fence stayed in Logan Hayes's mind all night. By sunrise, the Marine was already outside repairing the damaged section of fencing with Walter Bennett, while Rex patrolled slowly through the snow nearby. Logan worked in silence most of the morning, his thick gloves coated in frost as he secured fresh boards into place. The cold barely seemed to affect him anymore. Years spent in flooded towns, storm zones, and emergency deployments had trained his body to ignore discomfort, but exhaustion still lived behind his eyes. Walter noticed it every time Logan stopped moving for too long and drifted somewhere far away in his own head. You don't sit still much, Walter muttered while hammering nails into a support beam. Logan tightened another bolt without looking up. Never learned how. The old carpenter gave a faint grin. Your father was the same way. That answer stayed with Logan longer than he wanted. Over the next several days, the ranch slowly changed shape. Logan installed motion lights around the barn and mounted 2 old security cameras near the eastern road using spare equipment left behind from a previous construction contract. Walter repaired sections of the stable roof while Margaret carefully organized supplies inside the house, rationing canned food and medicine like somebody already preparing for a hard winter. Rex adapted quickly to the new rhythm. The German shepherd moved constantly around the property, checking fences, circling the barn, then returning to Margaret whenever her breathing weakened. The dog seemed calmer at Iron Creek Ranch than Logan had seen in years. That unsettled him a little. Rex had spent too long around tension and danger to relax without reason. One afternoon, Logan drove into Gray Hollow for supplies. The small Wyoming town looked tired beneath the storm clouds hanging over it. Old brick storefronts lined the frozen streets while pickup trucks sat covered in snow outside diners and repair shops. People noticed Logan immediately. Small towns always notice strangers, especially Marines built like walking trouble. At the hardware store, Logan met Deputy Ethan Cole, a lean man in his early 30s with short blonde hair and tired green eyes that looked permanently overworked. Ethan wore a county sheriff jacket stretched over broad shoulders. But unlike most officers Logan had met, the deputy carried himself without arrogance. His father had been a rancher outside Gray Hollow before losing most of his land during a railroad expansion project years earlier. Since then, Ethan distrusted large companies more than most lawmen were willing to admit publicly. You're the Hayes boy, Ethan said quietly while helping load fencing wire into Logan's truck. Guess so. Heard Blackstone sniffing around your ranch again. Ethan lowered his voice slightly. Folks around here aren't exactly of Curtis Shaw. Logan studied him carefully. Why? The deputy glanced toward the street before answering. Too many old families suddenly losing land after talking to him. That confirmed what Logan already suspected. Before leaving town, Logan stopped by the county records office and spent nearly an hour reviewing property files connected to Blackstone Energy. Several contracts looked wrong. Elderly landowners pressured into signing agreements they barely understood. Missing pages, changed acreage numbers, legal signatures rushed through during medical emergencies or foreclosure threats. By the time Logan returned to Iron Creek Ranch, snow had started falling heavily again. That night the storm arrived. Wind slammed against the house hard enough to shake the windows while snow buried the ranch under thick white darkness. Logan sat awake near the fireplace cleaning mud from his boots while Walter slept in the chair nearby and Margaret rested in her room. Rex lay near the front door, unusually alert, ears twitching toward the storm outside. Then suddenly the dog stood up. Every muscle in Rex's body tightened. Logan noticed instantly. "What is it?" Rex growled low and moved toward the back door. A strange smell drifted through the room seconds later. Gasoline. Logan was already moving before the thought fully formed. He grabbed his coat and flashlight while Rex exploded into the storm ahead of him. Snow blasted across Logan's face the moment he stepped outside. Visibility barely reached 20 ft, then he saw it. Flames. Orange fire spreading rapidly near the hay storage beside the stable. "Walter!" Logan shouted. The old man appeared behind him instantly despite the storm. "The horses!" Walter ran toward the stable before Logan could stop him. Inside the chaos, terrified horses kicked violently against the wooden stalls while smoke poured upward into the rafters. Logan forced open the nearest gate as Rex barked sharply near the back wall. Through the blowing snow, Logan caught movement, a dark pickup truck speeding away beyond the eastern fence line. Someone had done this on purpose. Walter struggled to guide one of the older horses outside when a burning support beam cracked overhead. Logan lunged forward, shoving the old man backwards seconds before the timber slammed into the ground. Walter hit the frozen dirt hard with a cry of pain. "Walter!" Margaret screamed from the porch. Logan dragged the injured man through the smoke while Rex continued barking toward the fleeing truck outside. By the time neighbors from nearby ranches arrived to help contain the flames, nearly half the winter hay supply had already burned. Walter's shoulder was badly injured. Margaret sat beside him inside the house afterward, trembling as she wrapped blankets around both of them. Smoke still clung to Logan's jacket while melted snow dripped from his boots onto the wooden floor. Rex remained near the front window, watching the storm outside without moving. Then Logan remembered the cameras. Less than 20 minutes later, grainy footage played across the old monitor connected to the security system. Headlights near the eastern fence, a pickup stopping beside the hay storage, one man pouring gasoline and clearly visible for 3 seconds beneath the snow-covered plate light, the truck registration number. Walter stared at the screen in disbelief. Margaret covered her mouth weakly. Logan's face hardened into something cold and controlled. "That's one of Curtis Shaw's work trucks," Walter whispered. For several long seconds, Logan said nothing. The easier choice would have been driving into town and handling Curtis the violent way Marines sometimes handled threats overseas. Part of him wanted that badly. But another part of him remembered what his father used to say: once violence starts, it rarely stops where you planned. The next morning, Logan drove straight through the storm to the sheriff's department with the footage, license plate information, and copies of suspicious Blackstone contracts he had collected earlier that day. Deputy Ethan Cole watched the video twice without speaking. Then the deputy slowly leaned back in his chair. "This is enough to start an investigation," he said quietly. For the first time since returning home, Logan felt something shift inside him. Iron Creek Ranch no longer felt like unfinished grief or abandoned property. Walter and Margaret were no longer strangers surviving inside his family's house. Somewhere between the fire, the storm, and the smoke, they had become the closest thing Logan Hayes had left to family. But as Logan stepped outside the sheriff's office, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street, and Curtis Shaw was sitting inside it, staring directly at him. The storm finally passed over Gray Hollow, leaving Iron Creek Ranch buried beneath deep snow and silence broken only by the sound of hammers against frozen wood. Walter Bennett's injured shoulder forced him to slow down, though the old carpenter hated every second of it. Even with his arm secured in a sling, he still tried helping around the ranch whenever Margaret was not watching. Logan caught him several times attempting to lift heavy lumber alone near the stable. Walter always muttered the same excuse afterward, that old men became useless too quickly if they stopped working. Logan never argued directly, but he quietly started carrying the heavier loads himself before Walter could reach them. Over the following weeks, Iron Creek Ranch slowly became busier than Logan expected. Word about the fire spread through Gray Hollow faster than snowstorms moved through the valley. People in small towns noticed suffering quickly, especially when it involved land that families had fought to keep for generations. Every morning, Logan worked from sunrise until darkness swallowed the mountains. He repaired fences for nearby ranchers, rebuilt collapsed sheds, and fixed frozen water lines across town for extra money. The Marine rarely spoke much while working, but people trusted him because he never cut corners. His large frame, rough beard, and permanent seriousness made him intimidating at first glance. Yet there was steadiness in him that older ranchers respected. Logan reminded many of them of the kind of men Wyoming used to produce before corporations started buying entire valleys. Walter began building small handcrafted furniture inside the barn using leftover timber from the fire. Wooden stools, picture frames, hand-carved shelves. His injured shoulder made the work painful, but it also gave him purpose again. Years earlier, Walter had owned a small woodworking shop outside Cheyenne before medical debt destroyed nearly everything he and Margaret built together. Logan noticed the old man smiled more whenever he worked with wood. Margaret helped however she could. Most mornings, she baked apple pies, cornbread, and cinnamon rolls inside the ranch kitchen before delivering them to Annie's Cafe in Gray Hollow. Annie Porter, the cafe owner, was a heavy-set woman in her late 50s with curly red hair streaked with gray and cheeks permanently pink from years standing near hot ovens. Annie had lost her younger brother during an oil field collapse decades earlier, which left her deeply suspicious of large energy companies like Blackstone. She started paying Margaret for every pie she brought into town and refused to take less than half the profits herself. "You keep baking," Annie told her one snowy morning. "Let me worry about the customers." Margaret nearly cried hearing that. Rex unexpectedly became part of the ranch's growing reputation, too. Children in Gray Hollow followed the giant German Shepherd whenever Logan brought him into town. Despite his size and military training, Rex remained remarkably gentle around kids, standing patiently while small hands rubbed his thick amber fur. Older veterans around town slowly started approaching Logan as well, often pretending they only wanted to see the dog before staying to help repair fences or clear snow from the ranch roads. One of them was Thomas Reed, a 60-year-old Army veteran with dark skin weathered by years working railroad construction after leaving the service. Thomas walked with a permanent limp caused by an old spinal injury from Afghanistan, but his deep voice and dry humor filled silence easily. He arrived at Iron Creek Ranch one afternoon with 2 spare water tanks in the back of his truck. "Heard somebody's trying to bury you people," Thomas said casually while unloading supplies. "Figured I'd disappoint them." More people followed after that. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to matter. Blackstone Energy noticed, too. The pressure started quietly. First came official-looking inspection notices taped to the ranch gate claiming code violations around the damaged stable. Then county water inspectors suddenly arrived demanding access to the property after anonymous contamination complaints were filed. Logan recognized intimidation when he saw it. Curtis Shaw never appeared personally anymore, but his shadow remained everywhere. One morning, Logan discovered the ranch's main water line had been deliberately damaged near the eastern hill. Frozen mud surrounded fresh tool marks cut directly into the pipe. Walter stared at the damage silently while Logan crouched beside the broken line. "They want us exhausted," Logan muttered. Walter lowered his head. Working. Maybe it was. Margaret's health had started declining again from stress and cold weather. Twice that week, Logan found her sitting awake near the kitchen table long after midnight with unpaid medical bills spread across the wood surface. She always folded them away quickly whenever he entered the room. One night, Logan finally sat across from her. "You should sleep." Margaret gave him a weak smile. "So should you." Neither of them moved. The silence felt strangely comfortable. After a while, Margaret looked toward the window where snow drifted across the ranch yard. "Walter keeps thinking we should leave before this gets worse," she admitted quietly. "He thinks we've already brought enough trouble here." Logan stared at the dark mountains outside. "You didn't bring the trouble." That answer surprised even him. By early February, Deputy Ethan Cole officially reopened several land fraud cases connected to Blackstone Energy using evidence Logan had collected. Once local newspapers heard about it, more ranchers from surrounding counties started coming forward with similar stories: missing contracts, pressure tactics, suspicious foreclosures. Logan spent long nights helping organize paperwork inside the ranch kitchen while Rex slept beneath the table. For the first time in years, Logan felt useful in a way military orders never fully gave him. He wasn't rescuing strangers hundreds of miles away anymore. He was protecting something personal. Then, less than a week before the county's final seizure deadline, Gray Hollow woke up to breaking news. A regional television crew arrived outside the courthouse after leaked documents connected Blackstone executives to illegal land acquisition schemes across 3 Wyoming counties. Reporters flooded the town square while cameras captured angry ranchers demanding investigations. Curtis Shaw disappeared 2 days later. No goodbye, no explanation. His office downtown sat empty overnight. Even so, Logan didn't trust the silence. Men like Curtis rarely vanished unless somebody bigger decided they were no longer useful. Late that evening, Logan stood alone outside the barn watching snow fall softly across Iron Creek Ranch. The ranch looked different now, warmer somehow. Smoke rose from the chimney while lights glowed inside the windows. Walter's repaired stable stood against the wind beside fresh tire tracks left by neighbors delivering supplies earlier that day. For the first time in 7 years, Logan could picture a future here. Then Rex suddenly lifted his head toward the distant road. The German shepherd growled low. Headlights appeared far beyond the eastern fence line, and this time they were not slowing down. Spring returned slowly to Wyoming, melting the snow around Iron Creek Ranch one quiet morning at a time. The headlights Rex spotted that night never reached the ranch. By the time Logan grabbed his coat and stepped outside with the German shepherd beside him, the vehicle had already turned around near the eastern hill and disappeared back toward Gray Hollow. Whoever had been inside either changed their mind or realized the ranch was no longer an easy target. Even so, Logan barely slept afterward. Old military instincts still kept him awake through most nights, especially when engines stopped outside the property or unfamiliar footsteps echoed too close to the barn. But something around Iron Creek Ranch had changed. The fear was no longer controlling the place. By March, patches of muddy grass began appearing beneath the melting snow. The ranch looked wounded after the long winter, but alive. Walter Bennett spent most mornings sitting near the barn doors, carving wooden signs and repairing furniture with one arm still recovering from the fire injury. The old carpenter looked healthier now than when Logan first found him. His face still carried deep lines carved by age and hardship, but there was color returning to his skin again. Working with wood seemed to steady him emotionally in ways medicine never could. Margaret improved, too. The constant fear of being thrown out had faded from her eyes little by little. Some mornings Logan would wake to the smell of fresh bread drifting through the ranch house while Margaret hummed softly in the kitchen. Her heart condition remained serious, but she no longer looked like somebody waiting for disaster every day. Rex followed her constantly. The German shepherd had become strangely protective of the entire ranch. Every morning he checked the fences before returning to sit near the porch while Margaret watered the small garden beside the house. Children from Gray Hollow occasionally visited now just to see the huge canine they kept hearing stories about. Rex always stayed calm around them, though Logan noticed the dog never fully relaxed whenever unfamiliar vehicles approached the property. The investigation against Blackstone Energy continued spreading across Wyoming throughout early spring. Deputy Ethan Cole and state investigators uncovered fraudulent contracts tied to multiple land seizures around Gray Hollow. Local newspapers printed news stories almost weekly. Several former Blackstone employees even agreed to testify after Curtis Shaw vanished. Nobody had seen him for over 2 weeks. Logan did not trust disappearances that clean. One afternoon, Deputy Ethan drove out to the ranch carrying official documents in a weatherproof folder. The young deputy looked exhausted, dark circles hanging beneath his green eyes after weeks of non-stop investigation work. "We finally got them," Ethan said quietly while handing Logan the paperwork. Inside were final county decisions freezing the pipeline expansion project until criminal investigations finished. More importantly, Blackstone's emergency compensation fund would now repay several families harmed during the illegal land acquisitions. Walter stared at the papers silently from the porch steps. Margaret began crying before she even realized it. The compensation, combined with the money Logan earned repairing ranches throughout winter, and donations from the Gray Hollow community, was finally enough to clear the overdue taxes on Iron Creek Ranch completely. For the first time in 7 years, the property officially belonged to the Hayes family again. Logan sat alone outside the barn later that evening, holding the tax release papers in his rough hands. The Wyoming sunset painted the mountains gold behind him while cold wind rolled softly through the valley. Rex settled beside him without making a sound. Logan looked down at the dog. "Guess we're staying." Rex rested his head against Logan's leg like he already knew. A few days later, the entire town seemed to arrive at Iron Creek Ranch at once. Trucks lined the dirt road while neighbors carried lumber, tools, blankets, and boxes of supplies toward the old stable near the western field. Logan had spent several nights thinking about what came next now that the ranch was safe. Selling the property no longer felt right. Too many people had already fought to keep it alive. Thomas Reed helped organize repairs inside the old horse stable while Annie Porter arrived carrying trays of food large enough to feed half the county. Even Deputy Ethan showed up after work wearing old jeans and work gloves instead of his sheriff jacket. Together, they rebuilt the abandoned stable into something new. Not another business, not another investment, a shelter. Simple rooms with beds for elderly people displaced from nearby counties, temporary space for struggling veterans, a warm kitchen for families who lost homes during the winter. Nothing fancy, just safe. Walter carved a new wooden sign by hand over the entrance, Iron Creek House. Margaret cried again when she saw it finished. That evening, Logan walked alone toward the old ranch gate carrying another piece of wood tucked beneath one arm. The original Iron Creek Ranch sign his father built decades earlier had been damaged badly by storms and neglect. Logan spent nearly 3 hours repairing it carefully inside the workshop before finally carrying it back toward the road. The sign looked old, worn, imperfect, but still standing, kind of like the people living there now. Walter watched quietly from the porch while Logan mounted the sign back onto the front gate beneath the fading Wyoming sunset. The Marine stepped backwards slowly after tightening the final bolt. For several seconds, he simply stared at the ranch in silence. The repaired barn, smoke rising from the chimney, lights glowing warmly through the windows, Rex lying calmly near the porch, Walter and Margaret standing together like they finally belong somewhere again. Logan realized the strange ache inside him had changed. For years, he believed returning home would only reopen grief he buried after losing his parents. Instead, somewhere between the winter storms, the fire, and the people who refused to abandon this place, the ranch had become something else entirely. Not a memory, not a graveyard, a future. Margaret stepped onto the porch slowly. "Your father would be proud of you." Logan looked away toward the mountains immediately, jaw tightening slightly. Nobody had said those words to him in years. Rex walked over and sat beside him quietly as cold evening air rolled across the valley. The porch light flickered on behind them, casting warm yellow light across the ranch yard while darkness settled over Wyoming. For the first time since returning home, Logan no longer felt like a Marine passing through somebody else's life. This place belonged to him again. Not because of paperwork, because he finally stayed. Logan took a slow breath of cold mountain air, looked toward the glowing windows of the old ranch house, then said the words he had carried inside himself for nearly a decade. Finally home. Sometimes God doesn't send miracles the way we expect. Sometimes he sends them quietly, through a place that still feels like home, through strangers who become family, or through the simple kindness of people who choose not to walk away when life gets hard. Logan thought he had returned to bury the past, but instead, God gave him a second chance to rebuild something he believed was already gone. In everyday life, many people carry silent pain, just like the ones at Iron Creek Ranch. Some are fighting loneliness, grief, illness, financial struggles, or battles nobody else can see. But stories like this remind us that even in the coldest seasons of life, hope can still return one small step at a time. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stay, one hand willing to help, or one light left on for someone who feels lost. If this story touched your heart, share where you're watching from or tell us about a moment when someone showed kindness to you during a difficult season of life. Your story may encourage someone else more than you realize. And if you enjoy emotional stories about hope, healing, family, Marines, and loyal canine companions, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey. May God bless you, protect your family, bring peace to your home, and guide you safely through whatever season of life you are facing tonight.